Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a really cool tutorial about mesh paint in Unreal Engine. Now, mesh paint gives us a really good way to kind of mix our materials together or mix our textures together and kind of blend them together over the surface of a model. Now, previously we've used like vertex painting for something like that, and that was a real good way of doing it. But now, since we have nanite, and nanite crunches our verts down kind of constantly, it just doesn't work anymore. So their solution was to give us mesh paint, which basically just uses a virtual texture to do it. And for me, it's a really cool thing. You can mix your textures together. You can have a different type of texture in one part. You can add cracks. You can add stucco. You can all do all sorts of things and have variation throughout the whole surface. So if you're building big building models with exteriors, this is a great way to do it. Or also, for ground stuff, you've seen a lot of people do stuff like this too. So on the screen now, I'm not exactly sure what we're going to show, but I'm going to show the results of this video. And I'm going to have one where we're going to mix some of our previous materials together just to see what kind of results we can get. And on the other one, it just kind of shows you with the red and the green, like the mesh painting over a mesh. Okay? And just a quick reminder, I am a small channel, so liking, subscribing, any kind of interaction is great for me, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you who watches these. Okay, so let's talk about how to do mesh painting in Unreal. So first of all, you're going to need to have Unreal Engine 5.5 or above. And one of the first things you want to make sure you do is you have virtual textures enabled, because this is going to use virtual textures. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you have mesh painting activated in your plugins. So go to Edit and Plugins, look up Mesh, Paint, and there you go. There's your mesh painting right there. Just make sure that that's ticked. Now, if you have to tick it and says restart your engine, just hold off a second, because we actually have to make sure you have a second thing done too before you restart. So we'll close that down. And if you go to Edit, Project Settings, now we're going to look up Virtual Texture. I just put in the word virtual there. And right down here under Virtual Textures, you want to make sure Enable Virtual Texture Support is ticked. Okay, and just set that to true. Okay, and if you did have to change those, you'll probably need to restart your engine. So those are the first two things you need to make sure you can do mesh painting and virtual textures. Let's close that down. So I set up this SM Wall MP here, and that's just static mesh wall mesh paint, just so I know. And then we're going to pull that right into our environment, right? Let's rotate that. And there you go. There's your mesh. Now, in order to make sure that you can paint on it, you need to do a couple things. For one, we need a set of UVs. So we're going to open up our mesh here. And you can see we have one channel of UVs, and that's it. And this is just our basic UVs of our thing. So we need to add another set of UVs so that we can do the mesh painting on it. And those kind of UVs are very similar if you've ever done like light map UVs in the past. You don't want to have your UVs overlapping. It basically flattens them all out so that wherever you paint, you can have the paint on your model. So I'll show you how to do that within the engine. Now, if you need to make some sort of wall like this and you need that kind of information, I do have tutorials on getting started with Unreal. This is basically just something I threw together in the mesh modeling in the engine itself. Very simple, very easy. But in order to do any of these, you're going to really need to start getting a foundation in Unreal. So either check that video out or kind of tinker your way through it. Okay. So the first thing you're going to have is you're going to have your one UV set here. All right. And we're going to want to create a second UV set. So over here on the right hand side, you can see LOD0 here. You want to be in LOD0. And you can see Generate Light Map UVs over here. And just tick that. Right? Don't change any of the other things. This is the source index is 0, destination is 1. And then we'll just hit apply changes. And we'll see what that does, okay? So we'll go back up to our UVs here, and now we have a UV in channel 1. Open that up, and that's perfect. That laid out our light map UV is basically perfect, flat, with some sort of gap in between them. Now you can change some of these different settings if you don't like the results, and if you have experience like laying out light map UVs in the past, you'll know exactly what you're trying to do. Now these aren't going to be used for light maps. We don't do that really anymore with Lumen, but it's kind of the same type of principle, right? So here are the UVs we need. That's great. And the only other thing we need to do is set our mesh paint texture coordinate index in here. So let's kind of find that. And right here, here's our light map coordinate index. You don't really need that anymore, but here's our mesh paint texture coordinate index. I'll even pull it out a little bit. And that's set to 1. So that'll mean it uses this UV channel 1 for the UVs for our mesh paint texture, right? Okay. So that's all you need to do. Then you save that down. And then we need to just start making our mesh paint material. Okay? So now we have something to paint on. We'll just make our material. So let me show you the mesh paint basic material and the basic idea of it, right? So let's just pull that up. Okay. And it all starts on this line here with your mesh paint texture object. So you're going to want to put one of those in, a mesh paint texture object. Of course, you can look things up. You can see there it is right there. And you connect that into the text of a texture sample. So just put in a texture sample and connect it to the text. Now, from there, you want to make sure that this UV coordinate here is set to 1 instead of 0. That means it'll use that 1 UV coordinate that we made. Okay? And then you plug the RGB from the texture sample into this mesh paint texture replace, right? This is the driver of the deal. So look that up and put a constant 0 into the default here. Obviously just hit one key and put in a value and then just connect her in. And then we'll separate a component mask out. So look up component mask. I'll even show you how to do that. So here's a component mask now. Right now it's set to RNG. We just want the red for now because we're going to do a very basic one. So just click on just have the red ticked over there. And that's the first thing we want to do. This is the important part of the deal right here. Okay? Now up here I have a couple texture samples. And I'll show you where I got those. In my textures, down here, you can see I have 1 pixel by 1 pixel textures that I created. Now, if you want to create those you can put in anything for a placeholder. I like to have the 1 pixel by 1 pixels. For me, it just organizes things better and it looks better, and I have a better understanding of how things are working when I have these 1 pixel by 1 pixels in there. So like I pulled in a 1 pixel by 1 pixel white and a 1 pixel by 1 pixel red, right? And those are my texture samples right here. So if you want to make these, I'll just show you quick. Go to Photoshop here, File, New, 1 by 1, height, width. Here's our guy right here. You can kind of zoom in so you can see it. There's our 1 pixel by 1 pixel texture, and then you can just fill it with whatever you want. So like this one's set to blue 00255, that's completely blue. So boom, there's your blue one, and then you just save that one. Okay, so that's how I made those. And then you just save it out with whatever the name is here. You know, I got the T 1 pixel green, gray, red, white, that sort of thing. So I pull those texture samples in. Here's the texture samples here. And then we'll plug those into a height lerp, and that's how we're going to blend our two materials together. So the white goes into the A of the height lerp, the red goes into the B. And then we'll take the mask here. That's the R, the red channel of our mesh paint. We'll pull that into the transition phase of the height lerp. And then we'll do a blend map material here, or a blend map texture sample. And how we do that is we just pull in gray into there, and then right click, convert to a parameter, and call it blend map. Okay? Let's delete that out. Run that blend map into a 1-, and then take that 1- into the height texture of our height lerp. All right? And then we'll put in a parameter constant 1 here. So 1 and left click, right click, and turn that into a parameter and call it blend contrast. Okay? Delete that. And this goes into the contrast there of the height lerp. This all plugs into base color. Now this is the very basic version of the mesh paint. We're going to do a more complicated version, but I wanted to kind of throw this together and show you how it worked. And if you want to do multiple versions, then you have to height lerp things together based on the different masks. So you have a mask R, and then you'll have a G, and then you'll have a B, right? Okay, so let's test this one out. So just save that there. Go to our materials here. This is our M Mesh Paint Basic. Just plop that onto there, okay? And then down in our mesh, on the right-hand side, you'll go down, and you'll find this mesh painting section now, right? So we'll pull that open a little bit, just so you can see. And here's the one you want to take here, overridden mesh paint texture resolution. Let's bump that up a little bit, because otherwise it's going to give us a resolution that's pretty low. Let's just put that at 512. Now that might be a little bit high, and you can get away with lower ones, but you're going to want to use like a power of 2. So if you're, in case you're unfamiliar, power of 2 is just 2 to whatever power. So 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 1024, you know, and onward. So 4096, that sort of thing. And this is very good information to know, like in general for gaming. Use power of 2, so you're going to need to know that in general. So we got that set to 512. We've got everything there. Now let's just paint on this puppy. First thing, let's make a material instance off of it, and we'll call it MI Mesh Paint Basic. And there it is here. And you can see I have a blend map that I added in. Remember we made that in the material. So I click that blend map, and I used a blend map that we've created before. It's our T medieval wall height map, and I just pulled that in to blend, and I'll show you exactly why. I want to give you an example of how that works. Okay? Okay, so now let's go into over here into mesh paint. Now you have texture color you want to be on. Okay, so I noticed that I have this M Mesh Paint Basic. I want the material instance so I can use that, the height lerp texture that I want. Remember this medieval wall height here? So let's put that on, dunk there. Now, and here we go, we click add, and then go to paint. Okay, so, and then remember we're going to be painting in different channels. So remember, this is the red channel. That's what we masked off in our material here. And white, we're going to paint white to paint on it, and then the erase color is black. But I basically just switch them and paint. I'll show you what I mean. So you'll click on the white here, red, the size of the brush, here's the strength, 0.15. That's starting out very light, right? So let's kind of zoom in just a tiny bit here. Maybe I can get us a little bit more. So let's put the strength as 0.1, just so we can have it pretty light. Up our brush size a little bit. Let's just start pulling across our material here. And if you notice, See how it's kind of filling in the edges more of where that height lerp texture was? So I kind of fill it in. And this will be more apparent when we actually add our materials together. But the reason it's blending like this is because, remember, in here we put this T medieval wall height in our blend map, right? In order to blend it. Now, of course, you can go strong and just blend over it and paint over it. But this would be how it would blend, like maybe you want to blend in the grout, you know? So you can use that blend map to give you better results of how you want to blend your materials together, right? So if you go to blend contrast here, that'll make the contrast of the blend map higher, and it'll allow it to kind of tighten it up. And I'll show you what I mean. So we can kind of tighten it up, see? Maybe something like that even, right? So let's go to, and if I flip colors, I can start erasing. Okay, so if you don't want something like this blend map in there, and you just want something basic, I also have, like, here's just a grunge texture that I made in Substance Designer. I didn't make it. It's just one of their noises that you can make in Substance Designer, and I just kind of, you can test a bunch of different ways to use your mesh paint, right? And we can pull that in for our blend map instead. And you can see now it's blending it kind of even more funky. But you want to test different ways of different blend maps, because then you can get pretty cool variations of how two textures blend together. Now this might look kind of goofy because, like, we're blending red or straight on there, but when you can imagine when we're actually blending textures, like they'll blend together better because we have this blend map going in. And you can kind of see right in here, see how it's adding these kind of like lines. And so I encourage you, actually, why don't we go over to Substance Designer and I'll show you really quick. Okay, so now here we're in Substance Designer. I'm just going to do a new graph quick, and we're not going to really do anything crazy, but I'm just going to show you. We'll just look up a noise node. And that was just grunge concrete. And there you go. That's all it is. And you can go to here and save it as whatever. And I saved mine as T grunge concrete color. And you can randomize it if you want. Do whatever you want. But I encourage you to look through the noises here. And you can, this is all sorts of different ways you could kind of blend map your stuff together. Okay? And I would test some of that out. All right, and you use that in the blend map for that material. And I'll show you the material where you're going to really use it. All right, so here we are back in here. And now let's make our more complicated material where we're actually putting materials together, right? Or textures together, and then we can blend those together. So remember, here is that material instance that I put in the T grunge concrete color, right? And there's that blend map. Okay, so now let's go and let's make the more complicated material. So that's the general idea, and you might have a good understanding of how to work it from there, but I'm actually going to run you through the more complicated one too. Okay, so here's M Mesh Paint 3 textures. So that means I'm going to try to blend 3 textures together with this Mesh Paint one. Right? So let's open that one up. And here you can see it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to run you through, and we're using a lot of the named reroutes because otherwise this becomes kind of like spaghetti. And I'm going to take you through all the way through. So the first section is our Mesh Paint mask, and we did that in the other material that we made. Remember, this is M Mesh Paint 3 textures. We're going to do 3, so we're going to have one in the, we're going to have a base, We're going to have one when you paint on red, and we're going to have one when you paint on green. Okay, so here's our mesh texture object running into our texture sample again. That one's set to UV1. Okay, this is the same as what we did before. Now we run that into a mesh paint texture replace with a 0 here plugged into default. Okay, then we separate out the masks from that. So remember, that's component mask, COM, right here. And then this is the R and this is the G one. So you have to tick here. Okay. Then I have that into named reroutes. These are, if you look those up, add named reroute declaration node, and then name those. Okay. I named one mask red and one mask green. Okay. That's coming off of our mesh paint masks. And then now here's that 2 blend contrast parameters. So put in a parameter, just put in your value, rename that blend contrast, convert to a parameter. And then that one plugs into blend 1 contrast. And this one plugs into blend 2 contrast, named reroutes. So you have to put those in too. Remember, named reroutes, I just showed you how to do up there. We're going to do a million named reroutes in this. And I'm actually going to change this a little bit while we're working in here because I realize I want to add a little bit more control. So up here is our texture samples, and I pulled in all these different 1 pixel colors and then converted it to a parameter. So this is 1 pixel by 1 pixel white, base color rough. Okay, so this texture sample here, this is base color rough, meaning this is the base, and then it's going to have color in the RGB and roughness in the alpha. Okay? And that's to keep our texture samples down. We're packing the roughness into the alpha of our color map. So we pull RGB into base color RGB. Now remember, that's our named reroutes, and we go alpha into base color alpha. And then I'm gonna show you all of these texture samples all the way down. So here's our red color rough. That's for our red texture. That'll be the first textures that we overlay over our base when we paint the red color on. That's red color rough RGB into a red color RGB named reroute, and alpha into a red color alpha reroute, right? Then green color rough, that's when we paint it green, RGB into a green color RGB, alpha into a green color alpha. This is base normal. This would be our first normal. RGB into base NRM, named reroute. Red normal. This would be our red normal map. So these are me pulling in my normal 1 pixel texture. Now that pixel texture was probably around like 130, 130, 255 for color. So like somewhere in there, and then Unreal will recognize it as a normal map for your sample. We'll plug that RGB into base NRM named reroute. Red normal, same thing, parameter red normal into red normal reroute. Green normal, RGB into green normal. So now, again, this is the normal map for when you paint on red. This is the normal map when you paint on green. And this will all be apparent when we add our textures to it. So here's our blend map 1. That's blending the first 2, the base to the red, RGB to a 1 minus to blend map 1. And blend map 2, I just pulled in a gray texture. Blend map 2, 1 minus to a blend map 2 named reroute. Okay? Okay, so I'm keeping this relatively simple so that we can kind of add on to it in the future possibly, but we're trying to keep it all very well organized too. So now we're going to blend our color maps together. So you can see here's our name reroutes. So here's base color RGB into A, red color RGB into B. So we're blending the red over the base color. Here's that mask red. Remember from back here in our mesh paint masks. then our blend map into height texture here of our height lerp, and our blend one contrast into contrast. Okay, so this is a height lerp, and then you add all of those on. The results get lerped into another height lerp here, where green color RGB is in the B. So now this is the green going over it. And you can imagine how to add a whole nother level if you want to do another material with blue. But we're just going to go base, red, and green for now. Bring our mask green into the transition phase. That's back from our here. You can see mesh paint masks again. Blend map 2 into our height texture, and blend 2 contrast into our contrast. Take those results, plug them into base color of our output. Okay, there's our base color of our output for material. So now we have roughness blend. So that was blending our color maps together. Now we'll have our roughness blend. So here's base color alpha. Remember, the alphas had the roughness in it. Base color alpha into A, red color alpha into B, mask red for the transition phase of the height lerp, blend map 1 for the height texture, blend 1 contrast for the contrast. Okay, you take the results into another height lerp, and this is basically, we're just doing the same things over. Base color alpha into B, that can't be right. So we want to go, that's funny, here's a mistake I made, so I put base color alpha in here. You see we're doing base color alpha, red color alpha here. This one should be green color alpha. So we go to our named reroutes, and it'll list them here. Green color alpha, that one should go into our B here. We can delete this one out. Green color alpha into B, mask green into transition phase, blend map 2 into height texture, blend 2 contrast into contrast, and those results go into our roughness. Okay. Now, if you try to do this without the name reroutes, you'd really understand why there's crisscrossy stuff kind of going everywhere. And sometimes it's a good idea to kind of get into the habit to use the name reroutes. So now let's blend our normal maps together. Same kind of idea. Base color normal into our height lerp A, red normal into our B, mask red into transition, blend map 1 into our height texture, blend 1 contrast into contrast. Results of that height lerp into another height lerp here, green color normal into B, mask green, blend map 2 into height texture, and blend 2 contrast into contrast. Results of that into our normal. Alright, so there you go. That's our M Mesh Paint 3 textures. So there you go. Let me show, and then let's show you how to set up the material instance for that. Okay, so here's our original here. We're going to show you. So here's our M Mesh Paint 3 textures here. Make a material instance out of that. And that's what I made here. And I made MI Rocks Concrete Cracks. Right? MI Rocks Concrete Cracks. And here is that material instance, right? Let's kind of open that one up, right? And you can see here that I've already kind of named the blend contrast because I found one that I liked. So we're going to leave the blend 1 contrast at 0.85. That'll just allow us to fill in along inside of the grouty edges of our rocks here. So let's kind of show you this. If I go to textures here, so what we're going to use is a bunch of the materials and the textures that we've created in previous tutorials, right? So we've made a medieval wall, we've made a concrete, and we've made concrete with cracks, where we took one of our decals and kind of merged it onto our concrete so that we could add the cracks to the concrete. So again, we have a medieval wall, a concrete cracks, and these are all materials that we've made in Substance Designer in previous tutorials. And I will link those in the description. So if you want to go back and kind of check those out so you can have these, that's great. The only thing you're going to have to change is we kept our textures kind of separated. So we would have a color map, a roughness map, and now we're going to need to pack them. So you can see here with my T medieval wall col R, that means there's a color map and a roughness map packed in the alpha channel. T medieval wall col R, and I'll show you how to pack that together, right? So this is where we would be if you followed, the tutorial. We would have a T medieval wall col BMP and a T medieval wall rough. So basically all you got to do is grab this roughness, Control A, Control C, and then go to our medieval wall here, and go to channels, and down here, click this little box with the plus, and it'll add an alpha channel, and Control V. And there you go. So now we have that packed together. Now I save that as a TGA. So then I saved it as a T medieval wall col R TGA. And I save it as a TGA just because when Unreal imports it, it understands kind of like that's going to have the alpha channel, right? And then you'd have to do that for the other materials we've made too. And I'll show you that. So now back to Unreal. So in here, you can see for base color rough, we have the T medieval wall col. That would be this one here. And then for the base normal, we have the T medieval wall normal. So that would be our first layer, and that's what you're getting to see here because there's nothing painted on. That's our first one. Then for the blend map, we're using the T medieval wall height map, which we made. And then for the blend map number 2, we're using that grunge concrete that I had showed you in the other material, right? So then for green color, this will be the third color we lay on. We're going to do the concrete cracks col R and concrete cracks normal. So here's the concrete cracks col R here. And we, like I said, we've made all of this stuff in previous tutorials. And then the concrete cracks normal, which is right there. Okay, for the green color. And you want the normal and the green and the color need to match up for each of these. Okay, so now for red color rough, we're going to just do regular concrete. So T concrete col R, which we have here, which again is the color map with the concrete roughness in the alpha. And then we'll do the red normal, which is the T concrete normal. Okay? And that's it. This is a very basic one, and maybe we'll build on this in the future, but this is basic, so let's just save that. And that's our material instance. And that's the one I called MI Rocks Concrete Cracks. So let's just pull that onto our puppy here. You can see it already has where we had kind of painted on some of the concrete. Now, I'm using materials that we've created in the past, right? I don't know if I'd necessarily use a concrete one here. This would be more of a plaster. You could probably get away with this. It looks pretty okay, but when you're going to mix materials together or textures together, you want to obviously plan on that. So you kind of want to make your textures kind of fit together. And this one will look fine, but in the future going forward, maybe, kind of create ones that are very specific to what you're going to be blending together. So we're going to obviously get rid of the paint job that we've already done here. So go to paint, and if we flip this paint color and erase color here, and we change our strength to 1, and we go to fill, we'll just have our medieval wall. And again, I'll link all of these materials that we've made in Substance Designer in the description. So let's mix our two colors together. Let's mix our concrete with our medieval wall, right? So here we have, remember I changed this blend contrast to 0.85, and that's kind of important for this first part. Okay, so let's kind of blend our concrete with our medieval wall here, right? Let's change the strength to 0.45 for our brush, and then let's just fill, and it'll try to blend both of them together, and we'll see what our results look like. Okay. So that looks pretty interesting, right? So it's blending our concrete with our brick wall, And you can see kind of like some of the rocks are kind of sticking out and some of them aren't. So that's actually a pretty good start, I feel like. So for one, what I'd like to do is have some of it more filled in some parts than others, right? So like we have some of it solid, but some of them are kind of popping out. And remember, this part is, you're getting into art now. This is kind of the artistic part of it, and you're going to have to figure out how to like paint these things in like your own artistic way. So I'm going to change the strength to 0.1 maybe, and we'll stay on the white, and I'm going to just kind of very lightly pull in some areas and kind of fill in. So we're keeping some of the bump, but some of it's going away. Now you can see how we're still keeping some of the bump and getting rid of some of the other bump, right? And I'm going to just do this really quick. You could spend a lot of time doing different things. And let's switch to black. And then I'm going to come up here and we're going to start making some of these, the insides of the rocks, more clear. So I'm erasing when I hit black on the red channel, remember. And remember, this is using that Heitler texture that we are using to blend. So for here, I'm going to undo some of these rocks, right? Very gently. But I'd like to have it so like some of the ones on the top and the bottom are sticking out more. You can kind of already see that happening. So we'll just follow some of these rocks along as we erase, right? So just kind of come through. Now it is going to erase more inside of the grout areas when you're doing this. So you might want to like get close up or change your brush size. Now to change the brush size, it's like the bracket keys, which I have mapped to my mouse, so you'll see that I can change the brush size. I use that in Photoshop as well. So we're not going to do tons of this, but like we're going to kind of show you how you can do it. And I kind of want to blend out a little bit of that grout from the tops. So I'm going to kind of come in and do that. So I want these areas to stick out. Now there's a few areas that I'm going to want to fix here. So we'll flip back over to our white, because some of it gets a little bit too out, sticky out, and we're going to kind of fill it in. Something like that. There. Okay, so you can see how you can kind of trim like the tops and bottoms. And of course, when I'm doing artistic stuff, I'm going to be a little bit more thorough here. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. So we'll do the bottom too. So come into here, go to black. Remember, black is basically erasing, because it's making a white on black mask in your red channel, right? So I'm going to come through here and we're going to kind of erase some of these stones. Get them to show a little bit more, but I still want some of that concrete to kind of be covering them. Maybe we could strengthen this just a little bit. It was a little bit faster. Okay, now you can see how these are pulling out a little bit. So there you go. And like I said, this is mostly artistic, so we could spend basically, you could spend some time doing this. Like doing all sorts of different variations, doing all sorts of neat stuff. And like I said, I wouldn't necessarily use the concrete. I think we're getting away with it. I think we can get away with it. It kind of looks like more of a plaster too. Just do very light up along the bottom. So there you go. This is kind of what I was thinking. Like maybe we'd do. So you have this transition from where you have the edge on the bottom. Some of these bigger cuts I want to get rid of. Okay, so we're getting in the weeds here, but that's kind of the general idea. And that's how you can kind of merge your materials together, right? So if we go back to like selection mode and then copy it, you can kind of see how it kind of transitions. Now you could have these painted differently so they don't tile at all, you know? So you could paint that one differently and have some variation in them. But I was just kind of pulling it out just to see what it would look like with it tiled. So there you go. And of course you could kind of fix the tiling too with just kind of going through and painting. So let's just delete those out. And let's add some cracks into there too. Okay. So the cracks is going to be our last deal. So for the cracks, we want them to be pretty light. So we'll go back to our mesh paint mode. And go to paint. Now we're going to select our green channel, remember. Paint color white. Let's go strength 0.5 maybe. And then fill. And that'll fill with our cracks. You can see how our cracks overlaid everything. Now we want to be pretty light with the cracks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of erase out some of the area here. We don't want a lot of cracks. Now remember, we made these cracks in a previous tutorials as well. And I'm just kind of doing this really fast here. So you're going to actually have to come through. That looks pretty okay. But you're going to actually have to come through and erase a little bit more. Now these cracks are built on the exact same concrete, so when they're over it, you're missing that neat bump from some of the stuff. So we have to come in, and I'll show you kind of how to do that. Save this. So let's open this up here in our material, and instead of, let's see here, our cracks, green color rough is this texture. Let's change that. Let's just make it green straight up. Okay, so now you can really see how things are blending together. Okay, so then what you want to do, let's go back to paint, and you want to erase close to the crack itself. So something like this, and follow that around. Now I'm going to kind of follow those cracks around, right? I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back, and then I'll show you the results. But I'm going to cut away for a little while because this is a little tedious. but then I'll show you the results of that. Okay, so I'm back, and you can see I kind of went around and I kind of masked out like the edges of the cracks there, and you can still see with the green outline there. But we're going to replace that with our actual cracks color map, and you can kind of see the results after that. So let's open up that material, and here you go, and instead of the green we'll put our T concrete cracks cull R, dunk, and there you go. And there you go. Now it's kind of merging our cracks in, and you can kind of see how you could like make your different cracks and have different variations, have them in different spots, and that kind of sort of thing. And it's pretty powerful. And if you go back and do some of the tutorials that we did with cracks, you can switch them around. So like maybe you don't like these ones, how these ones look, or where they're positioned or whatever. But you can kind of do like all sorts of different variations. So let's, as kind of a final thing here for these cracks, let's strengthen them in a couple different spots just so that they pop out in a couple spots and are kind of like less in a couple spots, right? So we'll go back to paint here, select this paint, make sure you're in the green channel, go back to white, 0.1 for strength. Then let's kind of zoom in. You can kind of see here's like one of our crack areas. And if we kind of just kind of pull and paint, we can strengthen these up a little bit. You can see how it now kind of pops out a little bit more in some of these major areas. So kind of pop that out. Maybe that's a little too much. So like maybe pop that out. Maybe down here a little bit. And then maybe just a tiny bit over here. If you kind of zoom in, you can kind of see. There you go. A little bit over here. You know, wherever you want. Like we're getting into more of like the artistic stuff, and it's going to be kind of up to you and how you kind of blend all these things together. But that's kind of the idea. Okay, so there you go, and that's how we got to mesh paint. Let's just pull that material up again. And here's that material, and you're probably wondering, how do we get that to like either parallax occlusion mapping, or how do we get that to tessellation? Now, I'll probably cover this stuff in the future, but for now we're going to stick where we are. You'll notice a lot of people kind of do this stuff online and have tutorials on it. And I'm not like knocking it or anything, but they have a very basic overflow, and I'm not going to show you how to do something unless it's practical in game. And one of the things you're going to run into with POM or even tessellation, you're going to have to make sure that your height maps are kind of matching up. You'll notice when a lot of people do it, they'll have really goofy results because one of the height maps is different grayscale variation, like a value range that doesn't match up to the other textures that it's blending with. And you want to add controls to your material in order to adjust your height maps, because even if the height maps are made perfectly, a lot of times they don't, even if you go to mega scans, they're not going to have all the height maps aren't going to be like, oh well, this is supposed to be higher so it's more white, or this is supposed to be lower. They're just going to be height maps, and you're going to need to like remap the value range of all of those to get them to blend together, and you're going to have to do testing. So that's a lot more added on to the tutorial, and we can cover some of that stuff in the future. And also with tessellation, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it to get it to perform, to get it to look good. And a lot of times you can get a result, and sure, you can look at it on the result, but you're actually not going to be able, it's not going to be usable in the game unless you do a lot more work, and there's a lot more to it, and performance-wise. And hopefully in the future, if this channel kind of keeps going or grows a little bit, I can keep on doing these tutorials, and we'll cover stuff like that. But I wanted to give you this starting point, because this is a great way. This is already usable. This is a great way, and it's been used in a ton of different games, and this is a great way to get variation and all sorts of stuff in your materials. So I want to thank you for being here. Hopefully that stuff was clear. I'm not sure. We kind of did that one on the fly. And I am very small. If you like this, like, subscribe, that sort of thing. We're not quite hitting the numbers that we need to for me to be able to make this a thing. I mean, I can continue to do tutorials, but it will be a little bit more spread out, unless the numbers increase. I hope you guys have a great day, and take care of yourselves, okay?